Imagine trying to park your car in a garage at about 150 miles per hour without hitting the sides of the car on the opening of the garage. As you can see, the operator of the vehicle needs to be very precise. Considering the best hijacker pilot was Hani Hanjour, and he wasn't allowed to rent a Cessna 172 single-engine propeller-driven aircraft due to the fact he couldn't control it at 65 knots, it's highly unlikely a pilot of less capability could control a heavy jet, zero training in type aircraft, at almost 10 times the speed, with about a 25-foot margin for error each side of the wingtip. The width of the World Trade Center is 208 feet. Wingspan of a 767, 156 feet. Here's a better example. Ever been to a Jiffy Lube or a similar place to get your oil changed? You drive in, stop, they change your oil, you keep driving straight to drive out. Now imagine driving through that narrow opening at over 150 miles per hour without scratching your car. However, you are familiar with your car. You have many hours operating it. So this scenario isn't quite the same. Now imagine yourself behind the wheel of a tractor trailer for the first time attempting the same maneuver. Could you do it? This is an interview with an experienced FAA check airman for his airline. What this means is that he flight tests and passes or fails pilots at his airline. Dan Gavados attempted to duplicate the World Trade Center attacks in their simulator in the weeks following September 11th with his line pilots. These are pilots who already have thousands of hours and can control large transport category aircraft at high and low speeds, not to mention a 172 at 65 knots, unlike the, quote, hijacker pilots. This is what Dan had to say when attempting to duplicate the attacks.
And after their sim training period, I said, hey, guys, let's try something. Let's see if we can hit these buildings like we saw happen.
Yeah.
And this was in the 737, and, a smaller, a lot more maneuverable airplane. And so I set it up for these pilots. And, keep in mind these pilots are, have many years of experience. And I set up New York, and they all just took turns trying to hit the buildings, and they couldn't do it unless they slowed down to almost landing speeds.
Wow,
they could do it.
I didn't know that.
That's,
and tell me about that.
That's incredible.
Yeah, and they could not hit those buildings. At the high speeds, they couldn't do it.
Yeah, well, I guess they were getting into all kinds of Dutch roll and everything then, right?
Well, that's right. That's exactly what was happening.
Things to remember about the Dutch roll. Firstly, there is a damping ratio, which is how quickly the motion dies down. There's a frequency, which is the speed of the motion itself. And there's the roll-to-yaw ratio, which is a measure of how much roll, how much bank angle to how much side slip. And those are the three aspects that you have to assess. And they're all important in their own way.
There were Dutch roll problems. People don't realize that to hand fly an airliner at those speeds is extremely difficult. It's very hard to hand fly an airplane at those speeds, and particularly if you're a novice, because a novice that's learned and all of their experience is on little airplanes, they over control everything. But you got to understand, going 300 knots in an airliner, and you move the controls like you would expect to do in a little airplane.
Right.
Well, I mean, you couldn't stand the G-forces. Everything has to be just fingertip control. So basically, out of the 10 times each guy did it, nobody could do it. I finally was able to do it on probably the last time. I jumped up there and tried it, and but I'm telling you that kind of opened their eyes, and I said, something is not right. We were finding that all the time. Even these airline pilots that have thousands and thousands of hours of experience had a hard time controlling an airplane at those speeds. So,
I'll tell you, even when I was making the film, and I was doing all those different maneuvers to set it up to hit the Pentagon, how you see all, coming in from the top, coming in from the side, coming in from the other side, going into where Rummy was sitting on the other side of the building. And then I tried to line it up exactly how the official story states. It took me about 5 or 6 tries, even in Microsoft Flight Simulator, to get it down right.
Landing speeds are about 5 times less than the speeds reported on 9/11 at the World Trade Center. The interviewed pilots were able to impact the World Trade Center as done on 9/11 on first attempt at landing speed. It's a whole different animal when attempting to do the same thing at more than 150 knots over maximum operating speed for the type aircraft. The slightest pressure doesn't even have to be an actual movement on the steering wheel or what we call yoke will produce very large changes in aircraft direction or even structural failure. The government wants us to believe these hijacker pilots whose best pilot couldn't control a 172 at 65 knots had trouble landing it, and then they got 3 aircraft completely inside an object with margins for error that didn't exceed 33 feet in the case of the Pentagon or 25 feet in the case of the World Trade Center at over 400 to 500 knots. You decide.